Okay, so welcome everyone. You are in the right place. We still have a few folks that are just getting started with us. A few folks that are logging in, but I'm going to go ahead and get started while they're logging in. And yeah, I need to remember to spotlight this. So let me get started with that. Okay, so you are in the right place. I hope you are. This is Visual Templates. If you're looking for underwater basket weaving, that is down the hall. So we are scheduled to go until 9 o'clock. However, if you would like to go a little bit later, ask some questions, really go a little bit more in depth, I'm happy to hang out as long as you are. So my name is Brian Tarallo. I'm a graphic facilitator. I'm the managing director of Lizard Brain Solutions. I had several people in the notes and comments and emails to me say, what the heck is Lizard Brain Solutions? And we're a graphic facilitation network of graphic facilitators, graphic recorders, sketchnoters, vision mappers, visual coaches, pretty much anything that has to do with anything that sits at the middle of business and visuals. And welcome to Nova Scribes. I know we have a few folks that are joining us for the first time. And so a little bit about Nova Scribes. So we are an open forum for visual practitioners, that is to say graphic recorders, graphic facilitators, sketchnoters, what have you, to share their knowledge. We are anyone who uses visuals to move forward. Nami, I'm going to mute you if that's okay.
Sorry.
I'm going to mute you again. So we are anyone who uses visuals in order to move others. That includes, as I said, graphic facilitators, graphic recorders, scribes, sketchnoters, video scribers, UX designers, and visual. We do organized classes like this one. We also do graphic jams where we do open spaces. Those of you that are familiar with open space technology as a facilitation method. We are going to plan to do one after this year's International Forum of Visual Practitioners. So if you can't attend the IFVP, attend our open space after the fact where you get to kind of read our sketch notes and see what went on there. And we do webinars like this one, just to do some skill shares and to learn from each other. So a little bit about what's coming up. This may have to change, but on May 2nd, we are looking at possibly doing an activity on what's called kinetic sculpture. Those of you that happen to attend IFVP in 2016 in DC, you saw that. That was the large mobile that 120 odd people contributed together to put together. So we're having the architect of that, Kevin Reese, give us a lesson on how to build kinetic sculptures. On May 9th, our own Trent Wakenight is going to teach his very unique style of comic book graphic recording. June 6th, we're going to do our kind of our foundation class, which is called Graphic Recording 101. And then June 20th, we're going to do one on visual design thinking. And by the way, today's session is going to be 2 hours. Rachel, might want to unmute yourself. Do you want to say a little bit about Heather's class that she's got coming up? Because I don't have it on the list.
Yeah, so Heather Martinez, who's a incredible letterer. She's going to be in the DC area. Hold on, I'm pulling up the details so I can give you the correct information. On April 12th and 13th, she and Jill Greenbaugh are doing a Bicablau and lettering workshop. And I'll put the link in the chat if you're interested in signing up. And then she's also going to be doing a Learn to Letter Like a Sign Painter on April 11th. And that's going to be through the Nova Scribes meetup. So just keep an eye out for that and you can put it on your calendar if you're interested in doing that.
Okay, thanks for that, Rachel. So keep an eye on Nova Scribes. These details will be coming as we've got them. Okay, so a little bit on how to use Zoom. So first of all, make sure that you can see and hear. And so just give me a thumbs up if you can hear me. If I can see that. Thumbs up. Okay. Deidre, can you hear me okay? I didn't see your thumb go up. Are you all right? Okay, nodding. So there you go. That's very good. If you get booted out, just go ahead and dial or click back in. Again, we are recording this. So do me a favor, please mute yourself if you're not talking. One of the rules with virtual facilitation is you are the last person to hear your own background noise. If you need to unmute yourself, you can either do that on your computer or you can hit *6 on your phone. Please use the chat to ask questions. And I'm going to be keeping an eye on that. And so, Paula, to your point, are any of the upcoming meetings virtual? Answer is yes, and those details will be on the Nova Scribes page, so keep an eye on that. So please use chat to ask questions. I will be keeping an eyeball on that one. Okay, so let's do a quick materials check. If you got the invite, you should have printed out. Well, first of all, make sure you got a solid network connection, your preferred note-taking tools, but you should have printed about 6 of these things, these dot grids. If you want to take a look at my camera, they look like this. Big white pieces of paper that have some dots on it. If you don't have that, that's okay. Just get whatever it is that you prefer to draw on. You will also want to get a copy of the visual vocabulary, the visual templates worksheet, which is the thing that I'm going to be training off of, and then finally the visual templates resource list. Okay. If you need the links for these, they are available on the meetup information. Okay, so let's go ahead and jump into it. I'm going to introduce visual templates by, guess what, using a visual template. This is one of my favorites. This is called the meeting startup, also known as the ORS chart. And this comes to us from the Grove Consultant. So raise your hand if you've seen this guy before. Anybody? Anyone? Pretty much everybody. Okay, then I can do just a light touch on this. Let me tell you what we're going to be doing. So up at the top, you would put the name of your meeting. In this case, we're doing visual templates. 7 o'clock, we're just doing our housekeeping right now. Welcome setup. I've talked a little bit about Lizard Brain, Nova Scribes, Zoom. We did our materials check, and now we are here on the ORS. The first half of the class is going to be focused on the value of visual templates and really working through some examples of visual templates. What I would say is that the first hour is really meant for the facilitator who wants to use visual templates. Okay. We'll cover some examples. We'll do a walkthrough of my favorite visual template, which is the graphic game plan. We'll talk about some best practices for using visual templates in facilitated meetings, and we'll talk about we'll give you some resources in terms of where you can go for more. The second half is more for the graphic facilitator who would like to learn how to design visual templates from scratch. Okay, and so I will endeavor to get to that by 8 o'clock so that we have plenty of time to really practice, because that's really the heavy lift on this one. So we'll overview the principles of visual template design. We will work an example together, and then you will practice on your own, and that's where your materials come in. Hope to leave a little bit of time at the end for questions and answers and to have a nice crisp close. The outcome is to explore the value of visual templates, see some examples, practice using them yourselves, and then actually practice designing them. So the agenda works for that pretty well. Hi, Vic, welcome. So roles. I'm Brian, nice to meet you. I will be your instructor tonight. My job is to share some knowledge and answer any questions you have. And again, I'm going to be keeping an eye on chat for that, just to keep us going. Okay. Your job as a participant, welcome Nova Scribes, your job as a participant is to experiment and try new things. Ask questions and also share your knowledge. Pretty much every hand went up when I said, hey, who's seen this before? So I know you already have a pretty good working baseline of how to use visual templates. So the ground rules, please add to the shared pool of knowledge. Be open, be present, be curious. Practice where it's safe. This is a safe space for you to, maybe if you haven't designed these things before, this is a chance to get your feet wet and say, well, okay, this works, this doesn't. And by the way, nobody plays the French horn well the first time, okay? If you're unsatisfied with your first attempt, it's because it's your first attempt. And then build on your strengths. I'm gonna come back to this later. But not everybody is a graphic designer. In fact, very few of us are. I am not. And so when it comes to actually designing these things, you're going to want to build on your strength, whatever that is. And we'll explore that a little bit more. But to kick us off, what I would like to do is to actually use this tool to say, to ask you all a question, which is, how have you used visual templates yourselves? How have you seen visual templates used by others? And why might you want to use a visual template? What is the value of visual templates? And go ahead and type this into the chat. And I'll see how quickly I can keep up with you. So how have you used visual templates yourselves? Keep it short. I only have so much space on the page. How have you used these yourselves? How have you seen them used by others? Why might you want to use a visual template? And go ahead and type into the chat for this. Nice. I think that's probably pretty good. Let me go ahead and see if we can fit all of this onto the screen. I'm not going to go ahead and read through this. Because you all read a whole lot faster than I talk, right? But just go ahead and do a quick scan and see if there's anything that stands out for you. Okay. Not bad, pretty cool. These big hand-drawn charts for visioning. Okay, I am gonna read through these are pretty cool. I have observed you and admire what you do. I do not aspire to be a visual graphic designer, but I do want to appreciate the gift when I facilitate. Okay, very fair. And again, I think I know who said that. And not to blow your anonymity on this one, but one of the things that I shared when we first got started is that before I was a graphic facilitator, I was a facilitator who happened to use visual templates. And a visual template is an easy way to, for lack of a better word, to break into graphic facilitation in a safe way, because you don't have to draw. All you have to do is fill out the form that's already there. Okay. Okay. So give me a show of hands. Would you say that this is a visual template? Yes or no? Anyone? Some people, some not. Some people are typing into the chat and says, yes, absolutely. Yeah, and it is a visual template. So for me, the definition of visual template is it's pretty open. If it's the kind of thing that captures information, if it creates some boundaries, if you have some containers, if there's a visual metaphor inside of it, and it's generally visually appealing, it's a visual template, okay? So here's a few examples of visual templates. And we'll just do this kind of show of hands again. So the first one on the list is probably the most famous. It's the business model canvas from Alex Osterwalder. It's used for strategy and business planning. So show of hands, have you seen this one before? You can go ahead and raise your hand for me. So I got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, Lisa. So about 7 people have seen this one. Not bad. So think of this one as your business plan in a box. There's and Vic put his hand up in the chat. Thanks for that, Vic. So think of the business model canvas as a business plan in a box. There's an amazing body of knowledge around the business model. You take a look at your customer set. You figure out who your key partners are and so forth. You figure out what the flows of your business are as they feed into one another. It's really a business plan in a box, which is pretty great. Okay, let's do another quick poll. So who here is familiar with Patty Dobrolowski? I can never pronounce her name. I'm really bad at it. Maybe you get her emails, maybe not. Lisa, awesome. Okay, so she's pretty neat because Patty is a graphic facilitator. And one of the things that I've always admired about her is that she just gives away her stuff for free. She's really pretty great in terms of what she does. And one of the things that she designs is visual templates. So if you go to her website, you can sign up for her newsletter. It's always something valuable, always a new tool, always a new tip. And she has this one that's called a snapshot of the big picture. And it's pretty simple, but is amazingly powerful. You start with your current reality. You envision your desired new reality, and you say, okay, what are your 3 bold steps in order to get there? That's it. So you can use this for groups. You can use this for coaching. How about this one, the cover story vision? Raise your hands if you've seen the cover story vision before, in any form. No? A couple of people, 1, 2, 3, less, maybe about 5 people have seen this one. I love the cover story vision. The cover story vision is a great way to get groups to think about what their future vision looks like. If you ask somebody, what does your company look like 20 years from now? They freeze up, they can't do it. They can't do it. It's just too much of a mental shift. If on the other hand, you say, okay, let's imagine your company 10 years from now, you've been wildly successful. And in fact, you've been so successful that a magazine of your choice has decided to interview you based on your success. What would the cover look like? What are the headlines? What are the pictures? What are people saying about you? What it does is it provides a concrete anchor and a container for that kind of conversation. Okay, Kit, I got your text. It's hard to see the PowerPoint. This is a quick scan. We're going to go a little bit more into it. And Nami, thank you very much for sharing your technical expertise in tech facilitating on this. So one more example I want to cover before we hit one pretty hard, and that is by one of my favorite people, Nevada Lane, the CEO of Lane Change Consulting. She actually has something called the Visual Change Planner. And what this is almost like a meta template. It's a template that you can actually use to organize other templates. It's a great tool for agenda planning and actually selecting your methods as you are designing your own facilitation and your agenda. And that's the Visual Change Planner. You can get it from Lane Change Consulting. But let's do another harvest from chat. And what I'd like you to do is to go back to the chat and give me some examples of visual templates that you've seen or used that I haven't covered here, okay? So go back to the chat, give me a few examples. Yep, 5 bold steps, that's one. SIPOC, that's another one. SIPON, SIPOC. The value proposition canvas, most definitely. Value proposition canvas is kind of the core of the business model canvas, looking at it in more detail. Anything by Christina Merkley, very good. Yeah, Shift It is her company, Merkley. And that's for visual coaching. A SWOT analysis, context map by the Grove, spot analysis by the Grove, 5 bold steps. We've covered graphic game plan. We're going to hit that one pretty hard. The graphic roadmap. Yep. And then a vision mandala. Awesome. All the Grove ones. Nice. Rachel, that was kind of cheating your answer, but that's okay. We'll let it slide. Yeah, anything by the Grove. We're actually going to cover those in just a light touch on those. Okay. So you have seen some visual templates before. All right, let's go ahead and do a deep dive. This is going to be fun. And by the way, I should say, this is the way that I actually prefer to use PowerPoint when I'm facilitating or training virtually. You get an idea of about how long this is. This is about 30 slides long. I don't know about you. I get a little frustrated as I'm sitting there looking at somebody else's PowerPoint. I'm like, when is this over, right? When do I get to talk? And I really don't have any problem sharing my notes at the bottom of the screen. Okay, so the graphic game plan. So I'm going to assume just for a second that you haven't seen this, and I'll walk through how I use it. So the graphic game plan, you could think of this as a project plan in a box. And where you would start with it, where I like to start with it anyway, is way out here with the goal. And so the first step is to take a look at what is the goal. And this is the ultimate outcome that you're trying to achieve. Does this color work? Can you all see this okay? Thumbs up, thumbs down. Sarah says yes. Rachel says kinda. Okay. Let me see if I can do a better color. I'll do this nice deep blue. Okay, so we'll say that this is, the goal is the outcome that you're trying to achieve. You want to start. This is the what. Let's see if I can draw. This is the big objective that you're trying to get at, okay? We could do another pen. So we're gonna add, how about this nice deep green? Okay, this will be our example. So in the example that I'd like to use, let's say I wanna build a tool shed. That's my what, that's what I wanna do. And I might, give myself a little picture here, just so there's something concrete that I can aspire to. And here's me happy because I have my tool shed. It's out there in the back of my yard. So that's where we start, is with the outcome. The success factors, you can think of these as the benefits. If you were successful in achieving your goal, what would it mean for you? You could also use this for further detail. Okay. And so in the case of my tool shed, maybe I wanted to match the design of the house. I'd like to be able to park in the garage, or maybe my wife would like to be able to park in the garage, which means getting all my junk out of the garage. And I want to add value to the house. That's how I ultimately know that my project has been successful, if it achieves those things, okay? So from there, I'm gonna go over to team and resources. And really the thing that takes up the most space over here, and you wanted to, is the people, is your human resources. And then after that, you could think about the money that you have available, the time that you have available, the space that you have available, and maybe the expertise, okay? So Vic, this is where .mlpf shows up, right? It's all of the resources that you have available in order to be able to pull this off, okay? And so in the case of my tool shed, well, the sponsor, who's the person that's really pushing for this, well, that's my wife. But the leader, that's me. I'm in charge of this thing. The members, the people that I have on my team, well, it's probably my twin sons, my boys, and maybe my dad is gonna help me out with it. And for resources, I wanna spend about $1,000. And I've got about 4 weeks to be able to do this. I've got the northeast corner of my yard. And in terms of expertise, well, I helped Dad build a shed. So I have a pretty good idea of what I'm doing. That's my own knowledge and expertise on this. Okay. So the rest of these, actually most of these, I'm going to want to do all of these at the same time. The stages or tasks, the enablers, and the challenges, I'm going to want to be thinking about these all together, and I'll tell you why in just a second, but let me define what I mean by these. When we're talking about the phases or the stages we're really talking about here, this is the phases or the milestones or the tasks, okay? This is the timeline. So for you project managers out there, this is the Gantt chart. This is the critical path. What do we do first, second, third? Okay. And in this example, well, let's divide it up into some weeks. We'll go week 1, week 2, week 3, week 4. And let's divide this up like this. We'll say, okay, first week, we want to do some designing, and then we want to do some building. That's probably going to take us about another 2 weeks. We'll go from here to here. And at the end, we'll just do finishing. And so as part of the design, I might go see what Lowe's has to offer. I might take a look at Pinterest, see what's there. I might walk the neighborhood and see who else has some sheds. So I'm going to do some data gathering to see what's out there and what I like. And I'm going to do some planning. Right? And then when I start building, I'm going to purchase my materials. I might clear the area that's in the back, in that northeast corner. Right? I might pour my foundation. And then week 3, after the foundation's nice and set, this is where I'm going to frame. This is where I'm going to put the roof on, put the walls on, do the siding, you know, maybe run my electrical. And then for finish, this is where I'm going to paint. Maybe I'll put a nice path out there. And then I'm finally going to move my stuff in. And I know I'm successful because I will have added value to the house. I'll be able to park in the garage. I'll match the value, and everybody's happy. There's me, my happy wife, and we're very happy about that. Okay. So that's the stages and tasks part. Now the enablers, we can consider these to be metrics and dependencies. You know, and I said something, and I got it a little wrong. What I meant was that you do these at the same time, because as you're brainstorming, right, maybe you haven't thought about it before, so you're going to want to jump back and forth between the stages and tasks, the enablers, and the challenges. But the enablers are really the metrics, or if you like, the dependencies. Okay. And so I might say I want it to be around 120 square feet, 12 by 10. I've got my plat and parcel, which is my plans of my yard that tell me about how big everything is. I have a landscape plan, and so forth. Okay. So these are the metrics and dependencies that are there. Now the challenges, you can consider these as risks or unknowns, okay, or constraints. And this is something that I like to do. I'm going to show you something that I like to do that's actually different from how the Grove teaches it. But I like it this way. Tell me what you think. I like to frame the challenges as questions. And really as how might we questions, which is something that comes from design thinking. Those of you that have your foot in design thinking, you might recognize that. So I might have said as a challenge, I don't know if HOA is going to approve this or not. But if I change this as a question, how might I get the HOA to approve this, right? There's an assumption of it actually happening, of it actually getting it done. So what are the things that I'm going to have to do to make sure that the HOA is going to approve it? Well, I'm going to take a look at the, you know, CCRs, covenants and restrictions and things, the architecture guidelines, and I'm going to make sure that there's nothing there, right? Maybe a challenge is, I don't know if the grade of the yard is going to be good if the slope is too high. Well, okay, so how might I ensure that the grade of the yard is correct? I'd have to go out there and level it, you know, and so forth, right? So framing each one of these, yeah, and actually Lisa says, yeah, HOA is the first thing that comes to mind. If you have a really restrictive HOA, yeah, that's the thing. So, you know, maybe there's systems that would get in the way. Is this going to get in the way of my sprinkler? That's a challenge. If I say, how might I make sure that this is not going to get in the way of my sprinkler? I'd have Miss Utility come out and mark it and all that sort of thing. Or maybe I'd, bring the landscaper that put it in place back. The challenge is framed as questions, I think. Build into it the presumption that there's something that you can do about it, okay? So the last thing that you're going to want to do, step 5 on the graphic game plan, is the title. Now, this is different from the goal, okay? This is the bumper sticker. This is the following, if you like Simon Sinek, this is the why, right? This is the really what's behind this whole thing. So this is not really about building a tool shed. This is about organizing my life. Okay. You might, to get to that, you might do an exercise like the 5 whys. It's like, well, why do you want to build a tool shed? So I can park in the garage. Well, why do you want to park in the garage? So that I can take care of my car. Well, why do you want to take care of my car? So that things are easier to find. If you dig into that a little bit more, you can get at that bumper sticker, that organize my life. Okay. So that was a quick walkthrough of how you might use one visual template, and in this case, it's the graphic game plan. I will say this one is my favorite. I've used it for a long time, and I actually use it if I have no idea what else I might possibly do. I'll pull out the graphic game plan. It's like the universal thing. You can facilitate any conversation through the graphic game plan. Okay. So I'm going to pause for a quick second and see if anybody has any questions so far, either about the graphic game plan or something else that we've covered. You can either unmute yourself or you can type it into the chat, but I'm going to do a quick pause. I love the graphic game plan. I can see it have many uses, most definitely. Yep, I would totally agree. In what circumstances is the game plan used and what type of meeting? Okay, so if there was a bell curve, actually let's put a bell curve in since I've got my Cintiq running. If there was a bell curve of meetings where I might use the graphic game plan, there we go. It would look like this. What happened to all my draws? They're all gone. That's not good. Okay, we'll just have to go this way then. If there was a bell curve, I would say right here would be all project planning, okay? This would be, you would use the graphic game plan in those things where the group has already decided what they're gonna do. They just haven't decided how they're gonna do it. And so if you're facilitating a group through a process, this happens way before, or way after, I would say, exploring all options, defining the problem that you're trying to solve, coming up with a criteria, coming to commitment, coming to agreement, deciding what we're going to do. The graphic game plan is really about the how. Okay? Circle, 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 circle. So we're going to start by exploring options. Okay? Then we would come up with some criteria. Now that we've got all these ideas, criteria. Then we would come up with, after we've got all these ideas, how are we going to rack and stack these ideas? And by what criteria are we going to decide against those ideas? And then after we apply the criteria, we're going to all commit and say, yes, this is the way forward. We're agreed that this is the way that this is what we're going to do, okay? And then we're going to start the planning process, okay? So Lynn, back to your point, if I ever get resistance, what that tells me is, because the graphic game plan tends to show up right here, what that tells me is that I haven't done a good enough job on this side, and I need to go back, explore options, make sure that I've got commitment, make sure that the criteria is fair, make sure that people are connected with one another, and then they actually understand the purpose and why they're there. So if I ever get negative feedback, it tells me that I haven't done a good enough job at stages that have come before. Now, I am doing a very light riff on the Groves facilitation model. And if you want to look that up, it's available on the internet. It's a pretty powerful tool that I use just to say, okay, why am I getting this pushback? Okay, it's a good question there. Sorry about the tech challenges. Anything can and will happen. Vic asks, how does this account for changes in plans? Vic, excellent question. I like to just keep the graphic game plan up and keep it up and on the room. And that's one of the things that we can actually use as a planning tool. Maybe it's there when we do our scrums. However often we do it, to go back and actually treat it almost like a Kanban, but to say, all right, how are we doing with this? And so you can actually go back and make changes, but it should be a living document. Sarah says, I love it too, haven't used it in a long time. I'm glad to be reminded of its value. Nami says, logistical questions. Do you print this out on paper? How big should it be? Okay, I'm going to save that. Actually, I'm going to answer that right now because we'll get to how to use visual templates. Nami, thank you very much for this question. Here's the answer to it. You can use visual templates in all sorts of ways, okay? You can use it with individuals. So, for example, somebody had brought up Christina Merkley's visual coaching. A few other visual coaching tools that are out there. There's the Personal Compass by the Grove. There's the Career Compass by the Grove. There's tons of visual coaching methods that are out there. And so individuals can use templates for some quiet reflection. Now, in that case, I would use this size, 11 by 17, okay? You can also use them in coaching pairs. Now, here's where I'm delineating between coaching pairs and collaborative pairs. When you're in coaching pairs, one person is talking and the other person is being a listener. They're being a scribe and a listener at the same, one person is being a scribe and a listener at the same time. The other one is focused on their thoughts, on communicating their ideas. I would save coaching pairs for intense personal work, leadership development, coaching, right? And in this way, the coach actually becomes a scribe and a conduit for that information, okay? So for intensely personal work. Collaborative pairs, on the other hand, I would put a collaborative pair on a graphic game plan. This is a little bit more on the task side of things than so much in the human world as a coaching pair might work. But if you need a group to fill out something that's a little bit more like task-oriented, something like a strategic plan or a strategic template, collaborative pairs work pretty well for that. And again, with a pair, I would use 11 by 17, this size. When we get groups that are a little bit smaller, that's where we want to use the larger templates. And so even with large groups, and I'm saying that, 3, 4, 5, 6, you can still get away with using some 11 by 17s, but they're going to have to write in pen. I still prefer to use actually a mid-size chart, a wall chart, which is a 4 by 6, okay, for groups that are of 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. Okay. And by the way, I'm going to share all of these slides out. These will be posted on the Meetup link, so you'll have access to these. And of course, for the large group, for the plenary, you're going to want to get the biggest chart you possibly can, at least 4 by 6, if not 4 by 8 or larger. Okay. Now back to use. One of the things that I really like to do is to use these in combinations of group sizes. Okay. And so what I might do is I might have individuals fill out a small form, a small template, and then share it with a pair, share it with a partner. And then a pair will share, with another pair. And this is a variation of 1, 2, 4 all. You may be hearing that. But rolling up these ideas until eventually people are sharing their insights into one large chart that's shared by the whole plenary. Okay, so that's where sizes come in. Another thing around how to use them, where's my cursor? Another thing around how to use visual templates is that I always like to provide a completed example. Guess what? This is the completed example I use of the graphic game plan. And so not only are you handing it to them blank, you're giving them an example of here's the kind of stuff that I want to see coming back from you. Okay, it's almost like a teacher's edition. And I think it's, quite frankly, I think it's ethical to put yourself through this too, to go through the process of actually filling one of these out, just so you know what your participants go through. Okay, so having an example. Okay, so we're coming to the very end of the usage side of things. Here's where to go for more information. So Rachel, when she said all the Grove stuff, this is all the Grove stuff. In addition to things that are not Grove, like the business model canvas, I try to be unbiased, but they've got the best stuff that's out there. I mean, they've got a template for just about anything. And so if you go to their website, which is right here, what you're going to be taken to is this, which is the entire suite of the Grove's tools. And they happen to call these things their strategic visioning templates. The graphic game plan is right here. You might recognize that. The ORS chart is right here. And they have a whole process for how you would use these. You would never use all of these in one sitting, but you might use 4, 5, or 6, okay? And so this is a great resource to go and take a look at. A couple of other resources, you can actually get these digitally That looks expensive, but if you do one virtual facilitation, it is worth it, okay? The two examples of the Grove templates that I showed you come from their digital graphic guides, which show up on a CD, okay? And if you do a lot of virtual facilitation like I do, totally worth it. It'll pay for itself in the first, whatever, hour or so of you actually doing some virtual facilitation. If you're a little bit more analog, I would get the Strategic Visioning Agenda Planning Kit, this thing right here. It's 75 bucks. You get a deck of cards that has all of these on it. And on the back, it's got some examples of how you actually use it, the instructions. The other thing that it comes with, which is pretty cool, are some really, shake and bake agendas. If you've got a day, if you've got 2 days, if you've got a day and a half, if you want to do, 6 virtual sessions, whatever, it's got an agenda planning kit right here. And then finally, if you really want to geek out and go deep on these things, go ahead and do their workshops. $1,200, $1,250 actually. They are sold out for April, but August, they have some availability teaching their strategic visioning, okay? That's if you really want to geek out. Okay, so we are at the end of using visual templates. Let me pause for a second and just check the chat. And if you have any questions, if you want to go ahead and go off mute, before we actually go into the design side of things, I want to get your questions before we move on. Paula says, do you need training for the Grove templates? No. It certainly helps, but you don't. They also have something, I didn't put it on here, they also have these things that are called leader guides. The leader guides are these booklets that are about 6, 7, 8 pages long that tell you way too much information about each one of the templates. They have a leader guide for every single template, okay? Oh, and before I forget, here's what not to do. Do not buy the digital graphics guide and then go to your printer and hit print on 11 by 17 or, taking them to Kinko's or FedEx or wherever and printing them big. That's a violation of their intellectual property, okay? And quite frankly, they don't print so well. I've tried, and they know that, by the way. They get all jaggy. What the digital guides are for is really how I'm using them right now, which is in PowerPoint. If you want to go big, just get them from the Grove. They're cheap enough. They make them easy enough. They're bulletproof when they show up. They're very fast. If you're planning a last minute, they can get them to you very, very quickly, okay? But if you don't want to pay a whole lot of money for templates, you could design your own. So we'll get to that. Any other questions before we jump into the design side of things? Okay, let's hit it. So you should have this handout, okay? Now, if you're joining a little bit late and you don't have this handout, that's okay, but this is really gonna be the map that we're gonna be using to go forward, okay? The principles that I'm about to show are gonna track right against this. Now, here's gonna be the flow for this thing. I am gonna do a light overview of these principles, the principles that are in here. Maybe I can't draw just because it's too light. These guys, I'm gonna do a light overview of the principles. We are gonna work an example together in designing a visual template from scratch. And then once we get through that, the time will be yours to practice and actually design on your own, okay? So what that means is I'm gonna cover these principles very quickly just so that we've got a common basis for understanding, and then we're gonna move on so we can get into the practice, okay? So here's what we are assuming going into this. So I'm assuming that you are all working facilitators, that you do a lot of group work. And so here's what we're not gonna cover. We're not gonna cover how to do the discovery with a client. We're gonna assume that you know the outcome of the thing that you're trying to do, the outcome of the activity. We're gonna assume that you know the themes to that activity, which is to say, what are the pieces and parts of this thing? We're gonna assume that you know how much time you've got and how it fits into the overall agenda, okay? And we're also gonna assume that you know the room and the participants. Now, these are all good things to keep in mind as you are designing, because these are all the variables and factors you're gonna wanna keep in mind at the very start of this process. Where you start is, borrowing from Stephen Covey, beginning with the end in mind. What is it that you want to achieve as a result of doing a visual template? This is a true story. One time, I'll equate it to an experience that I had graphic facilitating. I went into a company. It was kind of to do an interview to see if they wanted to hire me to do it. And so what they did is they sat everybody around the board table, their boardroom table. They said, do you need anything? I said, yeah, I just need a place to hang a piece of paper. So I hung it. And they said, okay, go. And they sat there quietly. And I'm like, whoa, it doesn't work that way. We have to have a discussion. So I had to lead them through a discussion. And just like that, visual templates don't exist in there just for themselves. They have to have a purpose. So knowing what that purpose is, that's where you start. But after you know that, this is where things get fun. Step 1, container selection. The rule here is that shapes have meaning. So there's a meaning that goes along with every shape. So here's a few, and I'm going to ask you for some. If we are looking at things like instructions, data, facts, step, these are things that are concrete. Let's draw them concretely. Let's put them in a box. If we're looking for things along a path, for example, signs, indicators, milestones, metrics, let's put them in a road sign. If we're dealing with things that are uncertain or challenges or doubts or risks, let's put them in a cloud, right? Nice fluffy cloud. I feel like Bob Ross all of a sudden. If we're dealing with things that are ideas or visions or insights or inspirations, let's put them in a starburst. Here's a couple of ways of drawing a starburst. I will say, if you take a look at your map that you've got, I actually drew this a little bit differently. But then I realized I had some participants that were drawing it half one way and half another. I was like, no, I was trying to show you 2 different ways of drawing a starburst. If you have the map, you'll see what I mean. So this is really what I was trying to get at. Drawing a starburst either this way or that way. If you're dealing with drivers, factors, flows, steps in a process, we can put those in an arrow, okay? Quotes, the so what's, the takeaways, the statements, perspectives from stakeholders, perspectives from customers, we can put those into a quote, into a talk bubble. Lists, those are easy. Let's put them in a list, just a nice bulleted list in order to capture things. And maybe banner ideas or big ideas, takeaways, themes, well, we can put that in this kind of this flag-shaped banner. And then values, attributes, somebody had mentioned mandalas before, right? Mandalas, success factors, we can put those in a circle, okay? And what we're doing here is we're really tapping into something that for a lot of people is really intuitive and intrinsic. You're really kind of tapping into the gestalt almost. You don't know why, but it's like when we think of things that are concrete, we want to put them in a box. When we want to think about things that are aspirational, they're sort of out there and in the air, and there's energy around them and flow, and that's why we put them in a starburst. And when there's things that are kind of kludgy and uncertain, where there's fog around it, that's where we put it in a cloud, right? So you're really tapping into the metaphor that is already built in to a lot of our communication today. Okay, so here's what I like to do. I'm going to put some, I'm going to put you to work. And go ahead and use the chat. So what is a container that you might use to capture hopes and aspirations? Go ahead and use the chat for this. And just give me an idea. You type and I'll draw and we'll see what we get. A sun, okay. This is the easy way to draw a sun. A cloud with rainbows, cool. So cloud, maybe with rainbows coming out of it. A mountaintop with a sun on it. I'll just add the mountain right here, very cool. A heart, I love it. A wavy circle, a wavy circle. Let's see. Nami, can you show me a wavy circle? A road going to a mountain showing someone to get there. Ah, got it. Okay, wavy circle. I wish I'd left more space for that. A wavy circle, thank you. A road going to a mountain showing the route to get there. Thank you, Vic. Someone at the top of a ladder. Very cool. Okay. Top of a ladder. And maybe the content for it is like here. A rainbow with a pot of gold. Yep, totally. Steps going up, a climbing person. Okay. So thank you for this. This is a good opportunity. I want to point out there's a difference between an icon and a container. You're going to want to point to objects that you can actually use to contain information, okay? It might be a little bit difficult to do, well, I suppose you could do a really big pot of gold, but like a person at the top of the ladder, that might be a little bit difficult. You could do things off to the right of it like this. But again, there's a difference between an icon, right, which is a little bit more complex, and then a container, which is big and bulky enough that it can actually capture the content. And what we're looking for here with the container selection are those kinds of things that you can use in order to put a list in, okay? Vic says different types of vehicles that change over time as the journey matures. Vic, you're more visual than I am. That's awesome. That's really cool. I think we did one of those once, didn't we? Okay, let's move on. How about changes, iterations, innovations? What are some containers, right? Remember, we're looking for big, bulky things that you can frame, that you can use to capture changes, iterations, and innovations. Any ideas? Light bulbs, of course. If I had a nickel for every time I had to draw a light bulb, I would have a private jet on 24-hour standby. So yeah, light bulbs, maybe several light bulbs, rocket ships, big ones, big fat ones, right? So you can actually, you know, record in them, okay? A big arrow, easy. Giant arrow, like that. I wish I'd left more room. Spirals, What else we got? Big arrows, roads, definitely. Mirrors, wow, deep, Lynn, that's cool. Yeah, okay. Very cool. So we're building our visual vocabulary here. How is it that we might use these frames? Plants and trees, definitely. Thank you, Rachel. Rivers. Very cool. Yeah, and we'll talk more about landscape in a minute, okay? But using things that have landscape, there's like a whole visual language that's already built into landscape, so that's a great one. Let's do one more. Goals, outcomes, and objectives. Goals, outcomes, and objectives. Okay. So we've got a target, very cool. So like that, maybe we can record around it, a target, you know, big old juicy arrow. Nailed it. Like there's a nail, and then maybe you could do, you know, bulleted list next to it if you like. A parchment banner, sure, why not? Parchment banner. A clipboard, definitely, moving to action. Love that. Okay, recording this way. A finish line, a fat trophy, a star, a building under construction, a line with arrows through time. These are great. Thank you so much. See, you don't need me. This is awesome. Okay, so that's container selection. Congratulations, you're all now experts. So moving on, the next is to figure out how is it that we're actually going to arrange these suckers on the page. Now that we've got our containers, a pretty good idea of what they are, how are we going to arrange these things? So the first thing to keep in mind is that time equals space. This is really important. If I had an 11 by 17, okay, and let's say that I was doing, I don't know, let's do something like easy. Let's do mission, vision, values, okay? And let's say that, you know, I wanted them to spend, I've got 60 minutes, okay, altogether. And let's say, you know, I just need them to do a light touch on the mission and vision, okay? I really want them to spend time on the values side of things. Here's what I'm going to do. I might design it like this. So that mission takes up so much space, vision is right here, but then values really gets that much real estate on it. And so if you were to divide this up, this would be about 15 minutes, and then 30 minutes. That's what I mean by time equals space. The things that get the most time, they get the most space. And so roughly be thinking about how much time each one of those themes, those parts of the activity, is going to get. And that's about how big you're going to want these things to be, okay? The next part of it is form follows flow. And what I mean by that is that let your, the layout be based on the activities and the themes, okay? And we'll hang on to this one. We'll get back to it when we actually do the example. It will make more sense when we do that. But if you think about some of the templates that you've seen before, here's the way that the forms actually are laid out. A lot of them go from, like this one, from left to right, okay? Some of them start in the middle and then branch outward, as does the vision mandala, right? And there's a reason for that. Some of them actually go from left to right and then down and then over again like a comic book, and then some of them go from top to bottom. But what almost all of these have in common is this flow right here, because this is the way that the Western eye reads. We start in the upper left-hand corner, we go from left to right, and then we go from top to bottom. And so as you're thinking about the sequence in which to lay these things out, what's going to happen is, let's get back to our mission, vision, values. People are going to start with the mission, and then you're going to go to the vision, and then they're going to hit the values. Okay? And if you really want to make sure that they're doing it in the right order, go ahead and number it that way. Rachel says, game plan goes right, then left, then middle. You're absolutely right. You're absolutely right. That's why I like to put numbers on this. Because that one is beginning with the end in mind, and then you're kind of rewinding the clock to say, how do you get there? So there are some exceptions. Another exception is the 5 bold steps, which actually starts at the top and then works its way towards the top, okay? And so if you're at all concerned about sequence, just go ahead and number these things. You're gonna do it 1, 2, 3, 4. And the reason that you're gonna pay attention to the sequence is because you're paying attention to the logical progression. How is it that one idea builds on another, builds on another, builds on another, right? So going back to the example of the graphic game plan, it's really hard to start doing those tasks in the middle if I don't know that I'm building a tool shed, okay? You want the logical progression as people are building their ideas to be reflected in your layout, okay? This will make more sense when we get into it. For now, I'm just gonna do a light touch on it. Okay, step 3, icons build the metaphor. So we talked about icons and the difference between icons and containers before. This is where you really get to geek out and draw, okay? This is where you would choose some things that really help sell it. And so for example, if we were gonna use, let's say we were doing that mission and vision thing. I didn't leave myself a whole lot of drawing space, did I? Now, last time I did this, it crashed. I'm hoping it's not gonna do that. So let's go back to that mission and vision one that I'd drawn before. So here's our mission, our vision, our values, okay? So what is an icon? Now I'm looking for an icon, right? I'm not looking for a container. What is an icon that represents mission? Go ahead and type it in the chat. Boat, awesome, I love it. So maybe we put a little boat next to it just to say, here's what it is. Spaceship, even better, love spaceships. Yeah, if you can have fun with it, even better. Spaceship, what else? Mountaintop, love it, mountaintop. Something to climb, maybe with a flag on top. A sunrise, cool. Easiest way to draw a sunrise is to draw a mountain and then put some rays coming off of it like that. Very cool. And then so forth. With vision, you know, maybe that's a like a telescope, if you like. And then values. I think it's okay to draw hearts. You know, there's not enough hearts in the world. We need to draw more hearts. I never used to draw hearts, now I draw them all the time. So the icon is helping to really build and kind of carry the metaphor and help sell it. It's just one other thing that you can do in order to add to the visual appeal to it. And if you have the visual vocabulary, this will help, okay? Now I'm gonna do a pause right here because I talked about, I wanna talk about the using complex systems. If you can choose a complex system to carry your visual metaphor, you're setting yourself up for success, because one of the things that visual templates actually do is that they represent complex systems anyway. Things like how do you build a tool shed. And so if you choose something with like a natural landscape that has tons of different elements as part of its system already, you're good to go. So for example, mountains, clouds, trees, rivers, right? You could use trees as opportunities. You all actually already identified that. Paths for initiatives. Cliffs or clouds as challenges. Mountains and flags for goals. Cities and towns for organizations or stakeholders, sunrises for visions. And if you're taking these different elements and arranging them using the layout, using the container selection, you're creating some really rich visual templates that can capture a whole lot. Rebecca says, sure, a farm. Maybe a farm, you could use that for resources, right? Or maybe some mindfulness even, taking some time away. So what I've got here is a few examples of some complex systems that you could use. I was really excited about this one. I actually worked for a chemical company at one point, and I was designing some visual templates, and I thought I was being really clever by designing this whole thing that had this whole chemistry set, right? And they said, no, we don't like that. I'm like, but guys, this is awesome. You know, it fits your culture. They didn't go for it. They didn't want it. But if you can pick something that actually captures the culture and the identity of the organization that you're working for, that's like bonus points for you. So here's some examples of some complex systems: ecosystems, you know, the ocean, outer space. You've talked about spaceships already. Highway systems, you know, what is the meaning of a road, an off-ramp, a bridge, a pothole? You know, the guy that's off to the side of the road. factories, and so forth. So looking at complex systems as a source for your visual vocabulary as you're thinking about icons and containers to build. And then step 4, we're not going to do this right here, but you're going to want to start drawing as quickly as possible. Okay, I like to do at least 4 different thumbnail sketches. And interestingly, it's either the first or the last one that I draw that my clients end up going for when I show them, okay, here's the options for this template. They never really go with 2 or 3, and I have no idea what it is. Usually it's like number 1 is the most obvious, number 4 is the craziest, and it tells you something about them. Okay, so Paula asked a question. How do I control the amount of icons so not to overuse? Okay, good question. I would say if it looks like this, you're drawing too many icons. I might do 1 icon per header, okay? And so just a quick example now, I will draw on this even though I said I wouldn't. Let's say we're doing that same thing, mission, vision, values. And let's do this the right way, right? Maybe our mission is a map, right? And we'll have it look like a torn kind of map, right? And our vision, so we talked about that, maybe that's this. See, we're getting there, right? And then our values, this is, yeah, why not? Let's do, hearts are difficult in this space. So let's do something a little bit more like this, just to fill the space. The other thing that I'm looking for is, how do I fill this space properly? Maybe it's a sunrise, like that, right? So how do I make sure, and this one's mission, vision, values. So here's where I'm going with this. I might do 1 icon per header, okay? And that's about it. You might do a few other things, just kind of like tie it all together, but I would keep it very, very light. And the reason for that is that you would want to give as much space as possible for the content, for the thinking that's going on. Good question, Paul. I appreciate that one. So Helena says, and Helena, just FYI, you're transmitting only to me. If you want to change that in chat, you can transmit to everybody. She said, can you draw an example of a company in the ball bearing business and what is their value proposition? Okay, first I have to know if that's a reference to the Chevy Chase movie Fletch, because I think he had like this whole bit about ball bearings where he was trying to like get past some airplane mechanics, and I sure hope that that's a Fletch reference. But if not, yes, but let me think about that one. No, it's not. Rats. Okay, it's not a Chevy Chase fan. Let me get back to that one. Challenge accepted. Okay, so that's 4. Now, step 5, we went from 4 to 6. Did you notice? Step 5 we've already covered. Remember, step 5 was all about usage, right? It was about thinking about the different participant mix. It was about providing an example and so forth. So we've actually already covered step 5. If you are designing these things, here's something you're absolutely going to want to do. This is try it before you buy it. I think, again, this is part of the ethic of a graphic facilitator, is actually to try these things before you put it in front of people. Get unbiased feedback. Find missing refrigerators. This is a callback to when I was a builder. We would always bring somebody in to walk our houses and say, hey, I've had a real hard time taking a look at this with my drywall. Do you mind taking a look at it? And he says, yeah, I kind of see what you think about the drywall, but dude, where's your refrigerator, right? You can get so into this that you miss the obvious stuff, right? So finding missing refrigerators, get a fresh set of eyes to take a look at these things. Maybe providing them a safe way of providing feedback. Maybe you've heard of I like, I wish, what if, right? It comes from design thinking. Taking on a beginner's mind, avoiding endowment bias. That's the thing I was talking about before. Sometimes we get so into these things that it's tough to separate ourselves. And as you go, adjust the durations, which is to say the space that we're allowing, maybe the content, and especially the way that you are actually instructing on this, how you're setting this up. So when you test this with others, maybe it's a small group, 2, 3 people that you trust, maybe it's the client, making sure that you can go back and iterate and practicing in terms of your delivery, okay? So testing and feedback, try before you buy. Now, I was hoping to get some questions about this. How do I actually make these things? This gets back to where, remember that initial rule, which is building on your strengths, okay? So I know not everybody on the call is a graphic designer. I know there's some people that are on the call who would not even imagine picking up a marker and drawing for themselves. The good news is you do not need to. The easiest thing to do is you can buy these things. I've already told you how to do that. You can go to the Grove. You can go to there's lots of, besides the Grove. Let me just give another resource. I'm pretty sure Sarah knows this one, but Design a Better Business. Sarah, you know this one? Yep. Design a Better Business. This is another collection of templates that's out there. They have an app, which I think is like $4, where you can get access to their templates as well. They have, this is actually pretty cool. Not only do they have things like the business model canvas and the value proposition canvas, but so far as I know, the book Design a Better Business, it is the only other company besides the Grove that was actually allowed to recreate the Grove strategic visioning templates. And so if you get this book, you actually get what I think are some of the top strategic visioning templates, okay? So you can actually go, you can buy these things, that's the first one. You could hand draw them small and just photocopy that. So this one right here, actually let me draw that in a better color. This one right here, this is one that Heather Martinez designed for me. And we were actually working with high school students on this one, and we wanted them to envision their future. She just drew this because she's awesome, but she drew this and then we put it on a photocopier and just hit photocopy. We did it in black and white so that it was easy to produce. So you can hand draw and just photocopy. That's for the smaller, the 11 by 17. You could hand draw large and photograph. That's what I did for this one. So this, our journey together, you can kind of get an idea of how big this thing is. This is like person size next to it. Okay. So that was about, that was 4 feet tall and around 9.5 feet across. But then after that, I photographed it and I was able to use it as its own visual template with other groups. I turned right around and used it with another group. But you've got your tree, you've got your mountain, you've got your path, which are all elements that we've already talked about. So you can hand draw and photograph. You can create these in PowerPoint with no chart junk. And what I mean by that is, let's go back to this one real quick. What I mean by that is, so this is a visual template. There's absolutely nothing wrong with it. It has a couple of superfluous things on it, like the little people and the horizon line in the back. But, you know, other than that, there's nothing wrong with using something like this and then taking it to FedEx or wherever. And if you need to print it big, having them print it big, or printing it at 11 by 17. So you can design these in PowerPoint too. This was entirely drawn in PowerPoint. And then finally, if you're really want to, you know, go the extra mile, you can design these things in Adobe Illustrator, but that is a heavy lift. If you're not already familiar with it, you're not going to want to learn Adobe Illustrator just for the sake of drawing visual templates. It's kind of tough to do. Here's what I would also say. Also understanding that a lot of you already have some background with visual templates. Why don't you share your ideas? Is there anything that I haven't covered besides purchasing, hand drawing small and then photocopying, hand drawing large and then photographing, PowerPoint, and then using Adobe Illustrator to design? How might you produce and print? And go ahead, if you type some ideas into the chat. Paula, because she's awesome, draws on the iPad. Amy says exactly the same thing. Okay, I don't have an iPad. I'm terrible at iPad. You know, I use an iPad, I just end up shaking it, wishing it was a PC, because I'm a PC guy, right? I know, I'm crazy. Procreate on the iPad. Okay, that is one. I'll give you that one. They actually got it on a few other things. Design in Canva. Yes, I just heard about this. So Deborah, thank you for that. So Canva, I'm just getting into it. Canva is an online platform that you can use for all sorts of great things. You can use it for infographics. But I would encourage you to check out Canva, and let me write that down. Thank you. I just heard about Canva. I'm really excited about it. I haven't dived too deep into it. Paula says she also uses, I'm going to assume she means Canva on that one. Yeah, iPad, and then Canva. Okay. All right, you ready? This is where it gets experiential. So mental shift a little bit. We are going to work an example together. So do you remember the going in part? I'm going to hand you the going in. Here's what we were going to assume. The outcome, what we are trying to achieve here is a SWOT analysis. Those of you that aren't familiar, we're looking at strengths, weaknesses, opportunities, and threats. Now the themes, which is to say the activities that are underneath the SWOT analysis, well, we've actually already talked about them, but just for the sake of definition, the strengths and weaknesses look at an organization internally. What are its internal strengths and weaknesses? And the opportunities and threats look externally at the industry or the environment, what might be out there in the context of things, okay? We have 1 hour for this. How it fits into the larger agenda. The agenda is one large strategic planning effort. The SWOT is part of first agreeing on current realities, which we're going to have to complete before we actually move on to envisioning future possibilities. So it's going to be one of the first things that we do, is starting with a SWOT. Here's what to know about the room and the participants. We have 16 participants. They are seated at 4 round tables, 4 participants each, and there is plenty of wall space for a large charts. We can do whatever we want. It is the ideal room. It's a racquetball court, right? Which is like exactly what we want to hang things up. All right, so I'm going to go back to you. Now you can either unmute and share some ideas verbally, or you can just type some ideas into the chat. But let's start with strengths. We're going to start with our container selection, right? We're looking for big boxes, big frames that we can use to fill. So what containers might we use in order to show strengths? Move my camera around a bit. A concrete block. Vic, that's about as strong as it gets. So let's do a concrete block like that. And which is nice because it gives us a little, that's very concrete. How's that? Pretty good? Says love it. A trophy, sure, why not? Yeah, something appreciative about that. Now notice, as I'm drawing, I'm really trying to fatten this thing out, right? And the reason that I'm doing that is because I know that the text is going to go in like this. So I'm really squaring up these shapes, right? Dumbbells. Dumbbells are tricky. The way that I'm seeing it anyway, maybe I'm doing it wrong, but if a dumbbell is like this, and maybe whoever wrote that, if you want to grab a sticky note and correct me here, but if this is a dumbbell, right, there's not really a big box that I can put stuff in. I might be able to go above and below, but it's not really a container. It's just something that kind of holds the space around the edges. A fat lightning bolt. Okay, so thank you for saying fat. Yeah, and we might do, let me get rid of this in the way. A fat lightning bolt, like that. Now, one thing to be aware of is that as you're designing these, you're going to want to avoid angles if at all possible, because they're just tough to write in, okay? Easier to have boxes, things that are up and down and vertical. Okay, I think that's pretty good. How about weaknesses? What might we use in order to, oh, I missed one, sorry. Check marks and a checklist. Thanks, Elena. Let's put that one on here. So check marks and a checklist. Okay, like that. How about weaknesses? What might we use in order to capture weakness? Cloud, Now, one thing I like to do when I draw clouds, actually, let me go back one. How most people draw clouds is they do this. There's nothing wrong with that, that's fine. What I like to do is make them look like big old thunderheads. So a flat bottom, and then small, big, small, big, small, small, big, small, big. Like, I just think it's a little bit more visually interesting. A Band-Aid. Okay, not bad. And maybe what I would do here is, if I was being really clever, I'd go in with like a light gray, right, to draw those little dots of the Band-Aid. And that way, when you draw across it with the text, you know, you could still see it. Okay, medicine bottle, great one. Nice, big, chunky thing, like that. And maybe we put like the label on it like this. Now again, remember, I'm really exaggerating this. I'm squaring it out, and I'm using this label to take up way more space than the medicine bottle actually needs, just because I want to leave that much space in order to capture text and content. Broken with dashes, light container. I'm not sure I'm reading that right, Paula. Broken with dashes, light container. Maybe I'm getting it. Is it something like this?
Yeah, I was just thinking like a light color.
Ah! Scared me, Jesus. That's all right, go ahead. What else?
Something that's good.
Wasn't expecting that. Is that,
a teardrop.
Is that what you meant?
Yeah.
Oh, a teardrop, good one. Okay. And then I'll just do a couple more. Person dropping a heavy weight, a plank off of a 1500 warship. Vic, you're really stretching my drawing capabilities, man. I love you, but man, I don't know if I can do that. Okay. A 1500 warship. Oh, gosh. Okay, I love it. That's great. Light color, sure. So putting things, we haven't talked about color yet, but we definitely will. Flying it, crashing into something, warship sinking, broken egg. Okay, awesome. I'm not going to draw all of these. These are all great ideas. Again, favoring the things that can be squared off easily, that can serve as a frame to capture a lot of content. Kryptonite. I have no idea how to draw kryptonite. I'm sorry. I'm just going to call it. I guess I have to just draw a whole bunch of green. Okay. Let's shift to opportunities. Okay, so we've got a couple of votes for the broken egg. Let's do the broken egg. Trying to think about how to draw that in such that it's good. So there's the egg. And then maybe if it's like a cracked shell here, and then here, and then, you know, a lot of space here in order to record some ideas. Like that. It's one way to do it. Love it. Okay, how about opportunities? Let's shift. How might we draw opportunities? The light at the end of the tunnel. Love it. So here's the tunnel. Here's a, well, also that's also in that kind of like death, right? Rainbow. Okay. Don't go into the light. Rainbow. Connecting the dots. Yeah. Yeah, and Helena, that might be where I do something like a mind map almost, and I would let the content drive. So a starburst, definitely, right? Going back to that original container selection, drawing a starburst. A light bulb, told you, private jet on 24-hour standby. Okay, let's put a light bulb. A pond with someone fishing, beautiful. So maybe it's like, you know, just the surface. We got a guy, you know, kind of like this, and he's got his fishing rod like that, and maybe you're capturing ideas here. Very cool. Doors, sure. Gold coins with someone writing on them. A hot air balloon, that's a great one. Nice and big. You can put a lot on there. Plenty of space to record in. A pot of gold, sure. Sarah votes also for the hot air balloon. A stage with a red curtain framing it, very nice. Doors, gold coins with writing on them, very nice. Oh yeah, each one. Yeah, so that's another thing that you can do is make a bunch of containers and having each one be a space to record one idea, right? This is actually works really well if you have some sticky notes, right? Some round sticky notes. And you can get those from Neuland. They have some great ones where there are some big, bright yellow and gold round sticky notes that you can use. So that's something else you can do. Okay, let's finish up with threats. What are some containers that we might use to represent threats? Unseen spider behind the bush. Okay, so let's see. Let's draw the bush and then spiders. I love it. Cloud with a lightning bolt. Sure. Zap. Okay. Fire. Big scary shark. That's my favorite. Big scary shark. Okay. Actually, hold up. If you can't draw a big scary shark, here's how to draw a shark anyway. You draw a water line. Yep. Catherine's got it. And you're done. Shark. It's a universal sign for shark right there. If you really want to sell it, you can put like a little person next to it. Sweating. Fire, a cloud with a lightning bolt, an outline of a giant tornado. Sure. Okay. A cliff. Use these all the time. That's great. So actually, I didn't draw that right. Let's go back a bit. So here's how to draw a cliff. Okay. So you would start with a horizon line. Oops, not drawn. You would start with a horizon line and kind of like this, almost like you're drawing a lightning bolt, and then straight lines down, just some quick throw lines like that. You want me to do that again? I'll back up. So how to draw a cliff? A horizon line, kind of like a lightning bolt like this, and then some quick throw lines, just straight down. And then if you wanted to do like a couple of dots, maybe like some rubble coming off the edge, that's one way you can do it. So we've got the cliff, we've got the big anvil. Yes, I love that. Okay, I got to do, just because you said the anvil, I got to do this. I'm sorry, I got to show this to you. Some of you have seen this before, but my favorite piece of art that I have in my house. Okay. My favorite piece of art that I have in my house is this big old print. Go ahead and take a look at my webcam. But it is everything that the Coyote ever ordered from Acme, okay? And what's cool about it is that each one, I mean, if you think about it, the Coyote and the Roadrunner episodes, they were all silent. So it was totally driven by the visual. And each one of those things, whether it was a coyote, whether it was an anvil or a round bomb or a Batman suit or like a street sweeper's push wagon, all of those are iconic now, right? They have a visceral meaning to people that you can pull into your templates and to your graphic recordings as a way of tapping into that emotional connection that people have. So yeah, anvils, great. And Catherine, thank you very much for that. Round bombs, that's awesome. Okay, a few others, caves on the side of the mountain, shark with jaws with writing on the side. Yes, okay, very good. And a dragon. So I'm gonna pick a few here just for the sake of argument. You can pick whichever ones you want, but I think what I'm gonna do is I'll pick one that have the same sort of theme to them, okay? And let's make it easy. Let's do the ones that have to do with like a horizon of some kind, like they could be seen in the natural environment. So let's do a cliff for one. Let's do the rainbow for the opportunities. Weaknesses, let's adapt this one a little bit. Vic, I love this idea, but we're gonna adapt it a little bit. And then something for the strength. So what's something visual that has to do with a landscape that represents strength? What might you see in the landscape? Roots, mountains. I was thinking mountains too. Okay, so let's do mountains. Okay. You could use trees, just the same. Okay. So how about like that? Now, layout selection. Remember, we're doing strengths, weaknesses, opportunities, and threats, right? Any ideas? And you can take yourself off mute. You can type. I'm going to try not to jump. How might we lay these out? Any suggestions? Four quadrants. Kit, let's go with that. Okay. That's pretty easy. Now I'm going to sketch in a light color just so we can see it. So 1, 2, 3, 4. Now remember, the other thing from layout selection is we want to make sure that we're allowing adequate time. So is there any reason that we should give one quadrant more space than another with a SWOT analysis? Let's say just for the sake of argument, probably not. You know, let's kind of keep it the same, you know, and so we would do like 30 minutes. We have an hour, right? So let's do 30 minutes on the strengths, weaknesses, and then 30 minutes on the opportunities and the threats. But help me out with where we might actually put these things, right? So where would you want strengths to go? Strengths, weaknesses, opportunities, where might we start here? The top left, always in the top left, right? Because that's universal. That's the way that people read. But which one of those might go here? Up at the top, number 1. Strengths, okay. Yeah, starting on a positive note, a lot of, yep, 2 people say strengths, sure. Now what, where to? And then weaknesses to the right, sure. Okay, and now just in case there is that tendency that for somebody, they might want to drift south with that. Okay, somebody else said opportunities on the right. Let's go with weaknesses for right now, just because I drew it. And Vic, you're not wrong, we could easily do that. But if we wanted to say, okay, this is going to be the internal, and this could be the external. And we could have easily flipped that, Vic, and you know, internal could have been up here and external could have been over here, in which case, like the positive stuff would have been up top, and then the negative stuff would have been on the bottom. Either way, it's fine. But just numbering this so that we're guiding people in the right direction. So I'm assuming 3, if we're going with, let's go with Sarah's. Strengths, weaknesses, This would be the positive, this would be the more negative, this might be the, I mean, it just fills itself in, right? So this is the opportunities and threats, okay? Now let's try pulling in some of these things. So we said mountains would be our strengths, okay? So I'm gonna draw in gray just so we can go over it if we need to. Let's do a nice big mountain here, like that, okay? And again, I'm really trying to take up as much of the space as possible. I might do a couple of little clouds here. But really trying to take up as much space as possible so that there's plenty of space to record some ideas. So for weaknesses, Vic, I'm gonna riff on your idea a little bit with the water. Maybe here is where we have like a lake show up, right? And yeah, why not? Let's put your pirate ship in. Let's do that. Okay. He's a little bit nervous. And right here, you've got as much space as you need to record. Okay. And then what did we say for opportunities? That's going to be the cloud and the rainbow. Okay. So I'm really drawing big and kind of fat and wide so that there's plenty of space to record. And for right now, we'll just ignore the fact that the rainbow is below the mountain. We wouldn't normally see that in nature. We'll just sort of skate past that. And then the threat, we decided on this, or I decided on this, this cliff. So let's see if we can connect these two. So maybe the rainbow continues over here, and then we've got this nice and cliff over here, like that. Okay. Now this is one way to draw it. I could have drawn it like this. Let's back that up a little bit. Okay. So now the threats are like way over the edge, right? A little bit more tension here. And again, before is, you know, we're going to ignore the logic of a cliff being below an ocean. We'll just forget about that for right now, okay? So let's pick a few metaphors to kind of juice this up a little bit, right? What might be a metaphor to represent strength? And I'm sorry, an icon. Now we're looking for a picture, right? Different from a container. This would be like a simple icon that you could drop in that would represent strength. What might be one? Muscle man, I love it. Oops, yeah, let's just keep going with that. So easiest way to draw a muscle man. Yeah. What's another one? Muscle man, muscle man, got it. What else? Popeye the sailor arm. Okay, so we're thinking kind of the same thing. So let's go like with one of these, okay? And by the way, I'm drawing these. I said you don't have to draw. Remember that? You can go, in fact, let me just demonstrate this real quick. You can pull in icons from a website that's called The Noun Project. I think that this works for anybody who wants to play around with visuals, whether you're a graphic facilitator or not. But if you go to the Noun Project, icons for everything, I'm going to type in, I'm just going to do strength, and we'll see what pops up. I know you can't see this. Yeah, sure enough, you guys nailed it. Here's what it gives me. Right? See, now I don't even need to draw this. In fact, let's keep going with that. Let's move over to weaknesses. How might we represent weakness? Oh, this is cool. I'll tell you what, here's what the Noun Project comes up with. Broken bone. Don't know why it's not moving. A crack in the ice. Nice one. Cracked ice. Here's another one. Thin hair. Yep. Broken glass. Broken. Yeah, and again, if you haven't played around with the Noun Project, I would highly recommend it. Just for building a visual vocabulary. Someone drooping over. Okay. Let's move over to opportunities. Oh, this is pretty cool. Here's what the noun project suggests when you just type in the word opportunity. That guy. Any others? Oh, and of course, everybody's favorite. Let's see if I can get this now. Go back. Bundle of $100 bills? Sure, money. Type that in. And what's nice is that they're actually transparent. And if you're designing one of these things, that makes it a lot easier to work around with. You don't have that white box that sometimes appears. Let's do, yeah, so when you type in opportunities with the noun project, it gives you the light bulb, of course. All right, I think that's pretty good. A road sign, let's do one more, road sign. Yeah. Okay. How about threats? Let's move to some icons that might, a road washed out sign. Okay. Oh, this is cool. Here's what the noun project recommends. When you just type threat in, toppled king in chess. I'm a fan of the big round bomb. Sarah, you and me both. We could actually do some best practices for round bombs. You know, like the whole Rocky and Bullwinkle. What is? It's one of my favorite things to draw. Anytime I get a chance to draw a round bomb, it's like, okay, I had a good day today. I get to draw one of those guys. A shark, love it. We talked about sharks before. I'm just drawing the shark fin. Yep, here it is. And here's what the noun project comes up with when you draw threats. Okay, pretty good. I think we can pause there. So now what we might do is we might take one of these and use it just to kind of juice this up a little bit, right? So I didn't leave myself a whole lot of space. This is, so weakness already has a bit of a icon already with that walk the plank, okay? And then threats, let's see. Yeah, we might as well put like a round bomb next to it. Here, okay? Like that. Strengths, we could put our muscle arm right here. And then what do we say for opportunities? Oh, I got it. So maybe it's pointing the way. Remember our road sign, like that, pointing the way ahead. Okay, cool. So that's it. Now we've got our thumbnail, and this is good enough to either refine, you know, do with a little bit more detail, doing this in either PowerPoint or iPad or any of those other methods that we talked about. And I'm not, just for the sake of time, I'm not going to go through and we're not going to do 4 different versions of this. So here's the part where we shift to practice. But before we do that, before I turn the time over to you, and you actually design one of your own visual templates, I want to pause here and see if there are any questions. So you can either use the chat or if you want to unmute yourself. Before I turn the time over to you, see if there's any questions hanging out there. I'm hoping this is a good sign that so far it's been super clear. Yes? Okay, seeing some nods. I appreciate the feedback. Thank you for that. Okay, so here's what we're going to do now. Everybody has your, Catherine, did you have something? Maybe? No, you're good. Okay. Super clear. Yes. Rebecca has to run. Thank you very much. And we will be recording this, so in case you've missed the rest of it. Get your materials. Here we go. So go ahead and grab that stuff that you had before. You've got your visual vocab. You've got your grid, your dot grid. And so here is what I would like you to do. And make sure that you have the visual templates for facilitation roadmap, this thing. So just to remind yourselves of the steps to go through this. Choose any one of the following examples: setting a vision for an organization, getting to know the team members, brainstorming ideas for a new product, agreeing on ground rules and group norms, tracking a team's progress as they work on a project, capturing content for an after-action review after a project is done, or assigning roles and responsibilities to a team, okay? Whichever one of those draws you, whichever one you have the most energy around, whichever one of those you feel like you have to deal with the most often, the most frequently, go ahead and pick an example that you would like to work on. Now, unlike any other time when you have to do this, you can invent everything else. You can invent what goes into that, which would be the themes, the parts of this activity, how much time you have, how it fits in the larger agenda, what the room looks like, and how the participants are going to work with one another, okay? You can invent all of that stuff. So that's it. What I'm going to do is I will keep the line open, but the time is yours to go ahead and practice. Remember, walk through the steps as we talked about it: container selection, layout selection, and then icons to build a metaphor, and come up with at least, let's say 2 thumbnails. When you're doing this for real, you're going to want to come up with at least 4, but just for the sake of practice, do 2 different thumbnails of a rough sketch of what your visual template might look like in order to achieve those outcomes. Okay? And I'll keep the line open. So Nami asked a question, can you explain what a thumbnail is again? Sure, I'll show you. This is a thumbnail. It is a rough sketch in order to capture it. If this is not pretty, you would want to pretty this up before you put it in front of clients, but that's it. That's a thumbnail. I also saw that there were a couple of folks that are dropping off. As you are leaving, here are a few things to keep in mind, okay? I wanted to show this to you after you actually had a chance drawing. So if you are drawing, focus on your drawing. But if you have to leave now, here's this. When I'm designing in PowerPoint, I like to use a 0.25 point line. That's a quarter line width. I just think that things look a little bit cleaner. As you're designing, going easy on the printer ink, right? Especially if it's your printer. So I like to use a lot of white space. I like to use about a 15% gray as a drop shadow behind some containers, or favoring some pastels, but really going easy on the printer ink. If you use a lot of rich colors, it's going to drain your ink really quickly. Pastels, same thing. They fade to the background. So that's kind of nice if you want to give it like the illusion of depth. Watch out for alignment and spacing. And what I mean by that is, and like I said, if you're drawing, keep drawing. Sometimes I'll see a visual template that will look like this. It's offset, not enough to be like on purpose, and just enough to be irritating, right? So watching your alignment to make sure that things are, you know, generally aligned, and PowerPoint certainly has that feature. And then the other side is watching your spacing, making sure that there's enough negative space in between the containers so that it can breathe a little bit, so that you're not really, you know, jammed together. So something like this, where you've got some nice gutters and some negative space in between, is much more just aesthetically pleasing to something like this, which takes up all of the space on the page. Use system fonts, right? There's awesome fonts that are out there on the internet for downloading. However, the problem is that if you put them into your PowerPoint, you send them to people, it's going to go default to Courier or something really horribly ugly. So just use the system fonts that are there. Use fonts that look good both on screen and printed. That means sans serif, okay? I like Futura. This is Futura. I also really like Gill Sans. They have their advantages, they have their detractors, but boy, can we just agree that we're not going to use Comic Sans or Papyrus ever again, please. This is true. If I'm going out to eat and a restaurant has printed its menu in Papyrus, I'm not eating there just based on that. We can geek out about that later, I'll tell you why. Including a horizon line. Okay, so we already talked about the richness of using landscape as metaphor. There's something else that happens. And keep drawing, by the way. I just want to do a little bit of a lecture on this because I think that this is pretty cool. When you draw a horizon on a piece of paper, be it a small visual template or a large graphic recording, what you're doing is you're actually forcing perspective into this, and you're giving the illusion of depth so that the viewer has the effect as if they're looking through a large picture window. And if you've ever done that, if you've ever looked out onto a large horizon where you really were able to see big sky and rolling hills and clouds, it just has the effect of opening the mind. having the effect of opening the mind to possibilities to see what's out there. I've actually heard David Sibbett refer to this phenomenon as what's called panoramic visualization. David Sibbett's the founder of the Grove, by the way, the one who designed all those templates we've been talking about before. And so if you have the chance to bring in a horizon line, you know, and if you know about the law of thirds, that's a good thing to keep in mind when you're doing that. It has the effect of creating expansiveness on the part of the viewers. So try to include a horizon line if you can. That's one of the reasons that, going back to just this very simple template that I did for this, that I had a horizon in the background. It had the idea of depth to it. And then finally, we talked about this already, but the layout, making sure that there are clearly defined sections, that there are spaces in between, and that the flow is from the top left down to the bottom right. Okay. All right, I'm going to go on mute for a while. I'll go back to the practice. And there's a couple questions that came in through chat, so I'm going to go on mute so I can answer those one off. So Paula has a question for everyone, and since she put it out to everyone, let me give you a few ideas. So for tracking a team's progress, here's just a couple of thoughts. So the good news is that there's actually a lot of tools that are already out there that exist in software that we can actually borrow from. An easy way to do it is to do just a simple Kanban board. And if you haven't seen one of those, it might look like something like this. If you're tracking progress, there's the things to do, there's the things we're doing, and then there's the things that are done. Okay? And what you could do is you could say, okay, we're going to put each one of our tasks on a sticky note. Okay? And we're going to shift them from one of these columns to another, depending on if we're working on them or if they're done or what have you. Now, here's the smart part of this, is that you can use the size of the containers, okay, in order to control how much work you're doing at one time or how big your backlog is. So that might be one thing that you could do, Paula. That's one option. There's a few more. You could have something like a simple calendar, okay? I mean, a calendar is a visual template. Draw a big one, you know, and say, you know, when are we going to do this? If we're going to do this, what has to happen before this? What happens? How long is this going to take? It's almost like a critical path Gantt chart, right? So when it comes to any of these, it's breaking down, well, what do we mean to that? What are the pieces and parts of it? So as you're done, you can go ahead and turn your camera on and turn on your microphone, turn off mute. Unmute, I guess that's the right way to say that. And we'll share what you've got.
Oh, can you see me?
Amy's ready. Kit's ready. Yeah, go ahead, Kit. Let me spotlight the video on you. Okay.
Yeah, I just did, for brainstorming, I went with the brain. Oops, can you see that? And where I thought you could write what it is that they're thinking about or what the topic is on here, and then just put, you know, stickies or whatever, or write it out elsewhere. And that's one. And then the other one was to just put the head with the brain in the middle, and then just be able to work around it.
Okay, I love it. That's great. If I could give you a recommendation for that, so go back to the first one.
Yeah.
Okay, right. So one thing to keep in mind is that when you're writing, when you've got an angle on it as opposed to a box, it can be really difficult to fill in a list. So here's what I'd say. It's not to say not to do that, but if you're going to do that, draw it with, gosh, now I'm going to be in trouble. Draw it with like a 303 Neuland, okay, which is a light enough color, or a light gray, like a 102 Neuland, which is a light enough color that if you're writing text on top of it, you happen to spill across those rays that you've drawn, it's okay, and it's not going to get in the way of things. Yeah, okay. Excellent. That looks great.
Thanks.
Who would like to go next?
I'll go.
Thank you. Amy, go ahead.
These seem so obvious, but I guess so there. Tracking progress, an arrow, a road, a series of to-do lists that go from unchecked to checked, and I didn't finish one, but gears, things moving.
I love it. Thank you. It's like you do this professionally. That's really cool. Thank you so much for that. Those are great. Who would like to go next? There you go. I think you're live. Go ahead.
Yeah, so one other idea I had for tracking teams' progress is maybe the different phases. Try this back. Phases with names and time. Does that make sense?
Excellent. I love it. Yeah. Yeah. So starting with the phases, almost like that graphic game plan, right? Where you do the core of the arrow of it. Yeah, that looks great. Thank you.
And then maybe the idea brainstorm would be a light bulb with stars or something.
Yeah. Okay. So what's interesting about this is here's something that I think everyone so far, you've done it naturally without us talking about it. Okay. If you think about what it takes in order to plan, that can be a little bit more, there's more structure to planning than just an open brainstorm, than an open conversation. With an open conversation, it's more open, right? And so it's a little bit less constrained. And so what I've noticed is, so Amy and Paula in particular, as you've been looking at like monitoring progress, those have been very kind of constrained things, right? You've really put some walls around these. Whereas with the more open stuff, like KIT was the one that you had, it was just kind of exploding out from the middle, which in some ways it actually reflects back the energy of what's happening in the group. Now that's not something that we've talked about, but it's something that's it's intentional, at least with the strategic visioning templates. So for example, the vision mandala, which can be one of the most energizing things that's there, which is really at the high energy, it's just a sunburst of things that are going on. Whereas the graphic game plan is very constrained. It's got, it's top and bottom lines, and then it's got columns to it. So in a lot of ways, depending on the feeling of, divergence and convergence, you can see that show up in your designs of your visual templates too. So thank you for that. That's really cool. Anyone else ready to go? Nami, okay.
Okay, I'll take a stab. So I chose the topic of getting to know each other, and I came up with just two different versions that we could use. One is it's I can't see it's a tree, but with these little circles, and I thought people could put either their name or like a quick profile into the circles, but it's a tree. So, and the tree represents the whole group. And then the other one I thought is like containers, but well, this is what I love to do, what annoys me, how prompt I am. I just chose these randomly, but my favorite places that I like to travel, but these are containers, and then people can write in these, and they would be more like the individual templates.
I love it. Sort of like as a getting to know you type thing. That's great. And I like how you took the icons and you did that thing about blowing them out so that there's plenty of space in there in order to record the ideas. That's great. Excellent. Thank you. Who would like to go next? Okay, well, let's move on then. Go back to share my screen. Okay. All right, so you gave it a try. We already covered these design tips. I went through these kind of quickly just for the sake of the folks that were dropping off of the call. There are no hard and fast rules. I have broken all of these many, many times, but these are things that I generally try to do when I'm designing. And again, I will post this out there for you to take a look at with the, and I'll put the link to this onto the meetup page, the event page, so that you have access to this and all of the resources that are inside it. And then that's it. We have come to the end. So I'm going to go ahead and open it up for questions. If there's anything that we haven't covered or something that's still burning for you, please go ahead and unmute, and I will do my best to answer. What's still hanging out there?
So, Brian, I have a question for you. How much can we bear to use the same metaphors over and over again? I mean, like, is that the value? Because we all know what the freaking light bulb looks like. Like, how hard work to try and come up with something new, and how much should we just rely on what's easy and convenient and familiar?
All right. This is a matter of opinion, I think. And what I'd like to do is I'll give you my opinion, but then I'd like to open it up for some of the other, practicing graphic facilitators that are on the phone, because I can see them. let me go back to something. So the visual vocabulary that I shared, this thing. So I made this thing out of, it was needs driven because I needed to do a quick, visual vocabulary, right? And the process for coming up with this is that I went through about 10 years worth of charts, and I copied all of the things that I drew 5 times or more. So I was very methodical about it, right? And by the time I was done, I was like, oh, okay, so there's about, I don't know, maybe around 70 or 80 things on this chart. That's great. That's everything I ever draw. And then I realized, well, wait a minute, this is all I ever draw. How come I don't ever draw anything new, right? And sometimes, to be honest with you, if I'm doing a week of graphic facilitation, I get a little nervous at the because on Friday, they're going to start seeing the same icons that they saw on Monday, right? My own opinion is that I think that it's perfectly fine to reuse the same icons and to try to draw them a little bit better again and again and again. I've drawn that round bomb, I don't know, and I'm still learning how to draw a light bulb. Here's my new light bulb. I'm very proud of it. So I went through these different, versions of a light bulb where you draw the circle and then you do this and then you do this and then you do that, right? The way that I like to do it now is to draw kind of a circle like that and then add this little lumpy thing down here and then draw this and then still do this, but more like that. So it's still evolving, right? And so I guess the short answer to your question is I think it's perfectly fine to draw the same icons because the purpose is that you want them to be received and translated and understood by your participants. But I'm curious to know what other people think about that. There's probably many differences of opinion. Rachel, do you have a different opinion on this one?
Here. No, I agree with what you were saying. So I think that the consistency is people like the familiar, and especially because sometimes this process can be unfamiliar, and so I think familiar metaphors help with that, help make people a little bit more comfortable.
Cool. What about you, Amy? What would you say? How might you answer that same question?
Well, I fall back on the same stuff too. I just can't stand that I'm still drawing an incandescent light bulb, outmoded technology for something that's supposed to be innovated. You know what I mean?
Well, so here's the cool thing. Yeah, but now these new, compact fluorescence.
Halogen bulb.
No, but like compact fluorescence, caused havoc in our industry because those things are almost impossible to draw. They're really tough. Right. But now guess what? The LED bulbs, like these things, the LED bulbs, they look like the old incandescent light bulbs. So it's like, we've come back to where we were.
Right.
But yeah, I agree with you. It's like, okay, here's another light bulb. That's why I say, every time I draw a light bulb, I'd have a private jet on 24-hour standby. By the way, this one's for Helena. So that comment that you made about ball bearings, right? You might draw something like this, and then, gosh, you've got a mandala here, don't you? Where you could do something like, here's our vision, right? And then, I don't know, here's our objectives, if you like, around the outside edge, and maybe, or values. It could be values. I didn't want to let this one go because it was like, okay, how am I going to do that with a ball bearing? And then, you could even put something else around the outside edge, like, I don't know, culture, something like that. So there you go, Helena. There's your visual template on ball bearings. Other questions? What else is still hanging out there?
I have a question. Can I go, Brian?
Yes, ma'am.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
How much of this in your work is pre-drawn, and how much do you do like on the spot?
That's an excellent question. I like to have it as pre-drawn as possible so that I can be really present and in the moment. However, when I'm doing what's called dynamic facilitation, which is I'm having to pivot everything and throw the facilitation out the window and make stuff up on the fly, then I've just got a blank piece of paper and I'm drawing it as quickly as I possibly can. I don't prefer to do dynamic facilitation, but sometimes you have to because the process that you've designed is not getting the group to where they need to be. Percentage wise, I would say about 90% of the time I've got it drawn in advance. Paula says she can share a template from her iPad if interested. Sure, please do. Then let me spotlight your video.
Ah, Nice.
Okay, so angle it a little bit more square to the, yeah, perfect, just like that.
So
Gorgeous.
I have more of a drawing background, but I got this partially from Brandy Agerbeck, where she uses the one body structure. And then I kind of came up with this idea of where you put the body becomes a symbol for information. And so I know it's backwards here, but what below the surface would go under the bodies. And then I use different parts of the past, present, future. And I just, how are you shouldering responsibility? Communication would be between the mouths. And so I try to use the body as the symbol, if that makes sense.
Nice.
Beautiful, I love it. Thank you for sharing. Anyone else? Any other thoughts? What else is still out there? And we're right at around 9 o'clock. I'm happy to go a little bit later if people would like to. Okay, well, if there's nothing else, I'm going to go ahead and stop the recording. Thank you very much for attending. If you would, please go back to the meetup page and leave your feedback. I think I may have said this earlier, but I'm going to deliver this workshop for MAFN, for the Mid-Atlantic Facilitators Network, in a few weeks. And so this is really a pilot. This is a test run for me to get the chance to share this. I've delivered this before, but never virtually. So thank you very much for being my guinea pigs. And your feedback is very welcome and appreciated. I really appreciate it. So thank you very much. And I'll stop the recording now.